Welcome to Sleepy Classic Tales. Tonight, we are listening together to the story of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, first published in 1813. It is one of the most widely read novels in the world. This is our own calmly told short version, clear, easy to follow, and perfectly suited for drifting into sleep. Part 1. The Bennet Family and Mr. Bingley. The story takes place in rural England at the beginning of the 19th century. At its center is the Bennet family, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet and their 5 daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. The family lives comfortably, but without great wealth, and Mrs. Bennet's greatest wish is to see her daughters married well. Not out of romance, but out of necessity. The family home cannot be inherited by any of the daughters, but will pass to a distant cousin. If the girls do not find wealthy husbands, their future will be uncertain. The calm of everyday life changes when a new resident moves into the neighborhood. Mr. Charles Bingley, young, friendly, pleasant, and rich. His fortune immediately makes him one of the most desirable bachelors in the area. Mrs. Bennet is delighted. She instantly sees the opportunity to secure one of her daughter's futures, preferably Jane, the eldest and most gentle. Jane is beautiful, kind, and has a warm nature that makes others feel at ease. Shortly afterward, Mr. Bingley invites everyone to a large ball. The entire Bennet family attends. At the ball, something happens that will later prove significant. Jane and Mr. Bingley meet, and they like each other immediately. Their conversations are friendly and open, and from the very beginning, it is clear that they understand each other well. But while this positive spark ignites, something else happens at the same time. Elizabeth Bennet, the second daughter, confident, intelligent, and sharp in her judgment of character, meets Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, a close friend of Bingley. Darcy is wealthier than anyone else in the room, handsome but reserved, almost arrogant. He dances little, speaks little, and seems distant. When Bingley encourages him to dance with Elizabeth, Darcy refuses and says the sentence that later hangs like a shadow over everything. "She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me." Elizabeth hears it. She laughs about it, but the impression remains. Darcy is proud, perhaps too proud, and she is not someone who allows herself to be treated as inferior. The evening ends with 4 strong first impressions. Jane, falling in love. Elizabeth, offended. Bingley, delighted. Darcy, reserved. And so the story begins, with misunderstandings, emotions, expectations, and first judgments that will later grow in very different directions. Part 2. Elizabeth, Darcy, and the growing tensions. After the ball, a time of expectation begins for the Bennet sisters. Mrs. Bennet is convinced that Jane will soon be invited to see Mr. Bingley again. And indeed, only a few days later, an invitation arrives to dine at the home of Bingley and his sisters. Jane is asked to come alone, a sign of special interest. Mrs. Bennet uses the opportunity to hurry things along. She sends Jane on horseback, even though rain has been forecast. Her plan succeeds in an unintended way. Jane arrives completely soaked, falls seriously ill, and must remain at the Bingley house. Elizabeth worries and actually walks several miles on foot to visit her sister. When she arrives, her clothes are dusty, her shoes wet, and the formal company in the house is visibly unsettled by her unconventional appearance. But Darcy begins to see her differently at that very moment. Her courage, loyalty, and independence impress him, even if he does not show it. While Elizabeth stays with Jane, several evenings are spent together with Bingley, his sisters, and Darcy. Elizabeth notices that Darcy watches her again and again, not arrogantly, but attentively. Yet her first judgment of him is firmly fixed, and she interprets every gesture as another sign of pride. After several days, the Bennet sisters return home. Jane is healthy, Bingley is clearly in love, and Elizabeth remains convinced. Darcy is arrogant, distant, and untrustworthy. Shortly afterward, the Bennet family meets a new man, Mr. Wickham, a charming and warm-hearted officer. He tells Elizabeth that Darcy once denied him his inheritance, a story full of injustice and disappointment. Elizabeth believes Wickham immediately. It fits perfectly with the image she already has of Darcy. Her prejudice deepens. While Wickham grows popular, Darcy begins, almost unconsciously, to move closer and closer to Elizabeth. He tries to start conversations, although he is not practiced at them. At social gatherings, he positions himself near her. He quietly defends her against mocking remarks. Elizabeth notices all of this and interprets it as further proof of his arrogance. A quiet, unspoken tension develops. Things come to a head when the Bennets receive another invitation, this time to a large ball. Jane looks forward to seeing Bingley. Elizabeth goes with mixed feelings, and Darcy struggles with himself. At the ball, it happens. Darcy unexpectedly asks Elizabeth to dance. She is surprised. He is unusually serious. And although she agrees, one can feel how much remains unspoken between them. Their conversation during the dance is polite but strained. Elizabeth stays sharp. Darcy stays reserved. Wickham is absent that evening, which unsettles Elizabeth and visibly relieves Darcy. For the rest of the ball, Elizabeth observes Darcy and Bingley advising their sisters. Something is in the air. She senses that decisions are forming of which she knows nothing yet. But one thing is clear. Jane and Bingley grow ever closer. Elizabeth and Darcy seemingly do as well, but in a completely opposite way. Part 3. Separations, Misunderstandings, and Darcy's Unexpected Confession. After the ball, everything at first appears to be going well. Jane and Bingley seem so harmonious that the entire neighborhood expects an engagement. Elizabeth is happy for her sister, and at the same time finds herself thinking of Darcy more often, though she would never admit it. Then something happens that abruptly changes the atmosphere. Bingley suddenly leaves. He departs for London, and no one knows when he will return. Jane is confused and hurt. Elizabeth is angry, and Mrs. Bennet is desperate. Shortly afterward, a letter arrives. Bingley's sisters write politely but coolly. They casually mention that Bingley spends much time in London with Darcy's sister, and suggest that something may develop between them. For Jane, it is a shock. Elizabeth immediately senses that something is wrong. She sees Darcy's influence everywhere. She is certain. Darcy has influenced Bingley. Darcy has spoken against the Bennet family. Darcy considers Jane not good enough, and Elizabeth's resentment grows even stronger. To gain distance, Elizabeth visits her friend Charlotte, who has married the dull but financially secure Mr. Collins. There, in the clergyman's house, Elizabeth meets another striking personality, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Darcy's wealthy and extremely proud aunt. Lady Catherine invites Elizabeth frequently and behaves in an overbearing, inquisitive, and blunt manner, asking questions no one else would dare ask and expecting her opinions to be law. Elizabeth remains composed and self-assured, a stance that increasingly impresses Darcy. While Elizabeth stays there, Darcy appears more often. He visits Lady Catherine, and whenever Elizabeth is present, his gaze follows her. He attempts conversation, asks about her day, and makes small, careful remarks. Elizabeth understands none of this as affection. She finds him strange, cold, and difficult to interpret. Then comes the turning point. Darcy seeks Elizabeth out alone. He is tense, restless, nervous, very unlike the man she knows. And then he says it plainly. He loves her. For weeks, for months, inevitably, he has fought against it, against her status, her family, her background, but he can no longer deny it. Darcy proposes marriage. An honest, deep proposal, but one still marked by pride. He loves her despite her family, despite her lower standing, despite everything that troubled him. The moment feels unreal to Elizabeth. She is overwhelmed, shaken, and angry. She refuses. Not gently, but clearly and decisively. She accuses him of separating Jane and Bingley, treating Wickham unfairly, despising her family, and hurting and humiliating her. Darcy is wounded but composed. He leaves without another word. The next morning he gives her a letter, a long, honest letter that changes everything. In it he explains, yes, he influenced Bingley, but because he sincerely believed Jane was not truly in love. Yes, he opposed Wickham, but for good reason, because Wickham squandered his inheritance and attempted to seduce Darcy's sister. Elizabeth reads the letter again and again. Her world slowly rearranges itself. She realizes she was mistaken, that prejudice narrowed her view, and that Darcy may be very different from what she believed. Part 4. Changing Feelings, New Encounters, and Darcy's True Nature. The letter Darcy gave Elizabeth does not leave her thoughts for days. Every single word challenges her once firm convictions. She recognizes how thoroughly Wickham deceived her and how blindly she interpreted Darcy's behavior as pride without ever questioning his motives. Elizabeth begins to see her own mistakes. For the first time, she seriously wonders whether she has done Darcy an injustice. To gain distance, Elizabeth travels with her relatives, the Gardiners, to another region of England. During the journey, they visit Pemberley, Darcy's estate, a large, elegant house surrounded by woods, meadows, and a quiet lake. Elizabeth agrees to the visit only because Darcy himself is said not to be there. But as they are shown through the rooms, Darcy suddenly appears. Not arrogant, not distant, but surprised, polite, and genuinely kind. He treats Elizabeth with a warmth that unsettles her. Darcy invites the Gardiners to stay longer. He shows Elizabeth that he has changed. He listens. He pays attention. He no longer tries to impress anyone. He treats her relatives with respect, despite their lack of wealth, something unusual for the time. Elizabeth realizes Darcy is not the man she thought he was. He is far better. But her newly awakened feelings are shaken when troubling news reaches her. Lydia, her youngest sister, has run away with Wickham. For a young woman of that era, this means social ruin, not only for herself, but for the entire Bennet family. If Wickham does not marry her, the family's honor is destroyed. Elizabeth is devastated. She tells Darcy the truth. She expects coldness or contempt. But Darcy reacts differently. He makes no reproaches. He simply says that he understands her pain. Then he leaves that very day. Elizabeth believes Darcy now wants nothing more to do with her. But secretly, without her knowing, Darcy seeks out Wickham, finds Lydia, and pays a large sum to force Wickham into marriage. He does not do it for Lydia, not for Mrs. Bennet, not even for the Bennet family. He does it for Elizabeth. He wants to protect her. He wants to save her family because he loves her, even after she rejected him. When Lydia returns and proudly speaks of her wedding, she inadvertently reveals that Darcy played a key role. Elizabeth stands motionless. She understands what Darcy has done, and why. Her feelings can no longer be denied. She respects him, she admires him, and she feels something closer to love than she is willing to admit. Before she can fully reflect on it, something else happens. Bingley returns. He visits the Bennet house, together with Darcy. Jane and Bingley find their way back to each other, this time without misunderstandings, without outside influence. Soon after, Bingley asks for Jane's hand. Mrs. Bennet celebrates loudly. Elizabeth rejoices quietly. And Darcy remains still, polite, and at a distance. Elizabeth is uncertain. She does not know whether she still has any hope. Part 5. Lady Catherine, the Final Change, and the Two Great Weddings. While Jane and Bingley become engaged and joy fills the Bennet household, a quiet uncertainty remains between Elizabeth and Darcy. She senses his closeness, his kindness, his effort. She now knows the truth about Wickham, about the letter, about Darcy's choices. Yet neither of them speaks of what hangs in the air. Then an unexpected visitor arrives, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. She appears unannounced at the Bennet home, full of agitation and anger. Her intention is clear. She wants to intimidate Elizabeth. Lady Catherine has heard rumors that Darcy may wish to marry Elizabeth, and she is outraged. In her eyes, Darcy is destined for her own daughter, not a young woman without fortune, without rank, and with an inappropriate family. In a long, sharp conversation, she attempts to extract a promise from Elizabeth that she will never marry Darcy. Elizabeth remains calm. She refuses to be intimidated, manipulated, or diminished, and she says the words that initiate the final turning point. "I am resolved to act as I see fit." Lady Catherine is stunned. She leaves in fury, and later reports every word to Darcy. What she does not understand is that her plan has achieved the opposite. Darcy learns that Elizabeth has not rejected him completely, that she has not turned away, that she might be willing to see him as a possibility. This thought gives him courage. The next day, Darcy seeks Elizabeth out. During a shared walk, he finally speaks openly. He apologizes again for his former behavior, for his pride, for everything that stood between them. And then he carefully, almost anxiously, says that his feelings have not changed, but that he asks for her hand again only if she truly wishes it, and if he will no longer hurt her. Elizabeth answers softly but clearly. She says that his kindness, his actions, and his consideration have changed everything. She says that she now understands him as he truly is, and that her feelings have long since begun to change. It is a quiet moment, without grand drama. Two people who finally see one another as they truly are. Darcy proposes once more. This time, Elizabeth says yes. The news causes every imaginable reaction in the Bennet household. Mrs. Bennet nearly faints with joy. Mr. Bennet is surprised but deeply moved by his daughter's seriousness. The sisters celebrate, and Elizabeth herself remains calm but happy. Shortly afterward, two weddings take place. Jane and Bingley, Elizabeth and Darcy. Two couples who found each other in very different ways, yet both through love, patience, and the ability to change. Elizabeth moves to Pemberley, Darcy's great estate. There, their shared life begins, shaped by mutual respect and the deep trust that grew from misunderstandings, mistakes, and revelations. And so the story ends, not with a great climax, but with a quiet feeling that pride has been overcome, prejudice laid aside, and two people have found one another because they learned to truly see each other. That was our calm, short version of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. While listening, you might have wondered why marriage in this story is less about romance and more about security and survival. Why nearly all the characters are so mistaken in their first judgments, and what personal connection Jane Austen herself had to the conflicts she describes here. These and many other questions are explored in our companion book, Golden Pages, Volume 1. There you will find the stories from our podcast, along with many interesting backgrounds, interpretations, and connections to each episode. The link is in the description. Good night, and if you like, we'll listen to each other again tomorrow.